Hello, good evening everyone. I'm just waiting for the audio and video confirmation. Then we'll start. So the topic for today is mostly going to be images only. In each exam, one or two, I won't say two, one image comes of an instrument identification of from orthodontics. So I will be taking up that and summarizing that up. Okay. So we just got the confirmation. We'll begin. So as I said, the topic for good evening everyone. Myself, Dr. Rijul Agarwal. I'm the orthodontic faculty at DAMS. So today we'll be taking up the topic of orthodontic instruments. It will be mostly image based only. In each exam, be it NEET or INI, one image comes from this part identification, and second its usage. So I have summarized all orthodontic instrument today in my presentation. Hope it will be fruitful and informative for you all. So we'll just start now. Okay. So orthodontic instruments, the contents or the way in which they can be summarized or divided into are the instruments for banding, instruments for bonding, the wire bending instruments, the wire cutting instruments, the class forming pliers, the instruments for bonding, debonding and debanding, and some miscellaneous instruments. So beginning with the first one, first is the instrument for banding. So the first instrument is the separator placing plier. Students, in each instrument, the way to identify हर इंस्ट्रूमेंट में एक हैंडल, एक शैंक और एक टिप पार्ट होगा. The way to differentiate or identify is to look at this tip or beak part, which will help you to identify or separate out the instrument from one another. So the beginning with the first one is the separator placing plier. We all know what is a separator. So separators are the dumbbell shaped rubber elastics which we place interproximally between the teeth prior to banding so as to create space for the band to easily slide through it. So this is a separator placing plier. Its tip is a barrel shaped angled beak with a handle. So what does it do? Barrel shaped tip prevents the breakage and slippage of the module, which reduces the tissue dam. And the angled beak, as you can see, that beak is angled, so it helps in easy placement in the interproximal contacts of the buccal as well as anterior segment. So the module is taken up at this tip, it's separated, stretched and placed into the interproximal contact between the teeth and for separation of the teeth. Next is a easier instrument. It's a band cutting scissor made up of tungsten carbide tips. We all know the advantage of tungsten carbide tip, highly brittle, okay, with long and short cutting pattern. The important point is this, the one which is highlighted in red. It is used for thin metal bands of band material up to 0.006 inch. Just remember this value. Rest, I know everyone can identify this instrument very easily. Okay, look at its tip, it's how it's angled and cut. Okay, next is a band crimping or pinching plier. So this is a posterior band crimping or pinching plier. posterior band crimping or pinching plier. So what is a band pinching? It's a instrument when earlier we don't used to have a preformed bands. So for forming a band of the desired dimension for a tooth, these pliers were used. So they are for the posterior band pinching plier, available separately for left and right side. So look at its beak again. It's a band clamping portion and a handle. Okay, it has an elevated and a depressed surface. The depressed surface goes into the hollow part of the mouth, be it the palate or the lower part. Okay, so we hold the instrument and crimp or pinch it to the desired dimension. So it's a posterior band crimping, or you can say also band pinching plier. Next is this double beak plier. You can look at its name में ही है double beak. Okay, so it's used for forming bands in the mouth. So पिछले वाले और इसमें फ़र्क क्या था? The previous one was a posterior band crimping or pinching plier. It is the anterior band form. It is used for forming bands in the anterior teeth. Okay, so earlier when we didn't have bonding, before that we used to place band for each and every teeth in the mouth, and on that band we used to weld the brackets. Okay, nowadays all we have bonding material. We still use banding for some teeth in the anterior region as well, due to the if the teeth is not hypoplastic or of amelogenesis imperfecta, the enamel is malformed, we are unable to bond brackets on it, so we still use banding on those surfaces. Okay, so these are pinching pliers. Okay, next is a band or crown contouring plier. Crown is the stainless steel crown, the SS crowns used in pedo. So it is used for contouring the pliers. Okay, so looking at its beak, it is single sided plier with two beaks on one end. One is concave, other is convex, allowing the contouring of the bands to the desired shape. So like this. Okay, this is the band contouring plier. The next one, this is the second image shown here, is the band crimping plier. So where do we used to do crimping? Crimping is required in the gingival portion. Gingival surface पे अगर जब हमें adaptation चाहिए for proper fitting of the crown or band, we use this crimping plier. So earlier was the pinching plier. Pinching was for the proper dimensions. Contouring and crimping are for adaptation. This is for gingival adaptation. And similarly, if अगर आप पूछें कि occlusally how do we adapt, because there is occlusal tapering as well, so we do it with this band pusher for that. Although band pusher का primary purpose वो नहीं है, but we use that for that purpose as well. So coming to the next is the Mershon band pusher. Okay, it's a single-ended instrument with a rectangular or working end tip and a cylindrical hollow handle on another end. The tip is serrated. Okay, so इसको आइडेंटिफाई करना बड़ा इजी है. सिंगल एंडेड टिप, बिग सा सिलेंड्रिकल हैंडल होगा. ओके, एंड बैंड पुशर यूज आप समझ सकते हैं टू अप्लाई प्रेशर फ्रॉम द टॉप. ओके, फॉर द बैंड टू गेट पुश इनसाइड द इंटरप्रॉक्सिमल कॉन्टैक्ट. एंड एडिशनल फीचर इसका यह फंक्शन है फॉर द कोरोनल पोर्शन पे अडेप्टेशन के लिए भी यूज़ कर सकते हैं. तो जिंजाइवल के लिए वी हैव बैंड क्रिम्पिंग प्लायर, जिंजाइवल क्रिम्पर्स. ओके, contouring के लिए we have contouring pliers. This is the same plier which is used in the stainless for contouring the stainless steel crowns as well. Next is the band pusher. Coming to the next instrument is the band seater, also known as a pied stick. So what's the difference between the band pusher and seater? Seater is made up of, this is a plastic handle on it. So plastic handle है, तो how it's used is we ask the patient to bite on it. The patient bite on it, and through to a biting force the band gets seated and get pushed to the interproximal contacts and get seated. So it uses bite force of the patient. Band pusher, we used to push it through our own force. Okay, whereas in band seater, patient's bite force is used for proper seating of the bands. Again, a easy instrument to identify and differentiate. Okay, coming to the next is a band plugger, director or pusher with a scaler. So it's a double-ended instrument with a band pusher or plugger on one end and a scaler on the other end. It's used for removing excess cement and placement for orthodontic band. Can also be used for after debonding brackets in the removal of excess cements with a conventional handpiece and a debonding per. So again, easier instrument to identify. Mostly जो पूछते हैं ये band pusher and band seater are used. This is rarely used in a clinical practice, band plugger. But just for completion's sake, I have mentioned it here. Okay, so these were the instruments for banding. Now coming to the second part, that is the instruments for bonding. Again, a very common instrument which is asked, that is Boone's gauge. So it has these markings 5, 4.5, 3, 4. So they are oriented like this, and it has a lead attached to it to mark the height for proper bracket placement. So Boone's gauge is used to mark the height for proper bracket placement. Okay, so it has a lead attached to it, used parallel to the occlusal or incisal edge for proper height, marking the proper height for placement. Okay, next is the most commonly used instrument which you all know is the MBT gauge or the bracket positioning gauge. इसका नाम students is a bracket positioning gauge. It was used by MBT, so it's a commonly or I can say misnomer to know him as an MBT gauge. But इसका नाम actual में MBT gauge नहीं है, it's a bracket positioning gauge. Okay, similar to the Boone's gauge जिसमें pencil थी, it does not have a lead attached to it. The brackets are directly positioned with the help of it. Okay, again this edge goes parallel to the incisal or occlusal edges, and this end goes inside the bracket. To mark it, place the bracket at the correct height. In the previous one, we used to mark it with a pencil and then place the bracket. In this MBT or the bracket positioning gauge, the brackets are placed and we correct the position with this help of this gauge. Next comes the bonding teaser or direct bond teaser. Again, look at its edge or tip, two flat beaks on one end and a handle on the other. Okay, flat beaks have serrations to securely hold the bracket when placing it during the direct bonding. So it's used in the direct bonding procedure. Okay, so next part is the banding हो गई, bonding हो गई. Now wire bending instrument. So what are they used for? They are used for wire cutting, clasp forming, arch forming and the loop forming pliers. So first is the wire, starting with the wire cutting instruments. This is the distal end cutter. This instrument has been asked a number of times in the INA exam. Distal end cutter. You can नाम में यूज पता है, distal end extension को cut करने के लिए यूज होता है. The wire which gets distally extended from the last teeth, banded or bonded teeth, it is used intraorally to cut that extended wire so that it does not hurt the cheeks of the patient. Okay, so it can be used from 0.014 inch to 0.22 cross 0.28 inch wire. Okay, it has this safe-ended safety mechanism in which when we cut the distal end, the wire does not get cut and get impinged on the cheek. It gets locked inside this beak only. So this is a safety mechanism, which is so that the distally end which is cut does not get loose out and get shrapnel does not hurt the cheek of the patient. So again, a very important instrument, that is the distal end cutter. Again, next is a pin and ligature cutter. It is comes in two design, that is a straight and a curved design. इसका अगर आप देखेंगे टिप ब्रॉड है, इट इज़ अ नैरो टिप. सो अगर नैरो होगा तो इट इज़ यूज फॉर कटिंग स्मॉल गेजेस और डेड सॉफ्ट स्टेनलेस स्टील लाइगेचर वायर एंड सॉफ्ट पिन. Okay, so it can be used to cut up to 0.05 inch only. Cut elastics and power chains, okay, as well. Okay, so this is the pin and ligature cutter, comes in two design, straight and curved. इसका curved को don't get confused with the distal end cutter. Most commonly आपको straight design ही देंगे, rarely it will happen they'll give you a curved design in the exam, but just for completion, if by chance it comes, you should know. Next is a very easy instrument, all of you must have used in during your graduation. This is a heavy duty or hard wire cutter that is used for cutting high gauges wire outside the mouth. So it can cut up to 1.3 mm diameter wire. Okay. Next is a face bow bending or cutting plier. Face bows are used in headgears, face mask. Okay, so these are used for bending and cutting the outer bows of the face bow. Can be used to bend wires up to diameter of 1.8 mm. Okay. So cutting instruments, most important the distal end cutter, the ligature cutters. Okay, heavy cut wire cutter is not important that much because I think everyone can identify it very easily. And lastly, this face bow bending or cutting plier. Moving on to the class forming pliers, beginning with the easier one, the Adams plier, which you have used for forming Adams clasp in your graduation. It has a two smooth rectangular peaks. Just keep a lookout on these words which I have highlighted in red, because they will help you to identify and differentiate the upcoming class forming pliers. Okay, the beaks are flat without grooves. See, there are no serration, the beaks are flat beaks. Moving to the next one, the Adams spring forming plier. Okay, so अगर इसकी beaks आप देखोगे Adams plier की, the beaks are pointed. Pointed beaks. Adams spring forming plier has two beaks, one beak is rounded, another is square and flat ended. So it's similar to a light wire plier used to adjust springs on orthodontic removable appliances and to smoothen and contour arch wires. So this is the Adams spring forming plier. The third one, the universal plier, the young style universal plier. Everyone must have used it during your graduation. Okay. So similar kind of Adams spring forming plier with one end that is rounded, another with a square ended face, used to adjust headgear, face bows and Adams clasp on removable appliances. It has a universal application from wire bending to adjustment for most removable appliance and wire components. Easy to identify. Okay, so class forming से अब आते हैं हम arch forming instruments. Beginning with the most important one, that is the bird beak plier. इसका ये नंबर ध्यान रखना है 139. It is also known as 139 wire bending plier as well. Identification के लिए again looking at the tips, it is a single ended plier with two beaks at one end, pyramidal and cone shaped beaks and a handle on another end. Okay, it is used to bend a variety of arch wires up to 0.28 inch. Okay, सो अगेन अगर हम एडम्स और इसमें डिफ्रेंशिएट देखें, टू स्मूथ एंड रेक्टेंगुलर बीक्स. Bird beak plier has one rounded end and one pointed end. So one is pyramidal and another is cone shaped beak. Students, again I am highlighting, इनकी beak के shape पे बिल्कुल ध्यान रखना है, because that's the only way they will help you in differentiating these pliers. Next is the light wire plier. So again, looking at this image, differentiate करने के लिए, the beaks have gradual taper, so they are long in height. Slender beak makes it easier to bend. Okay, it comes without serration and similar to Adam's spring forming plier. Used to place loops and bends in an orthodontic arch wire for forming arch forms up to 0.20 inch in diameter. So bird beak most important. लाइट वायर में डिफ्रेंशिएट करने के लिए लॉन्ग टेपर्ड बीक्स. नेक्स्ट इज द ज़ाराबैक लाइट वायर प्लायर. सो इट हैज सेरेशंस. अगेन द हैंड beaks have similar kind of shape. One is conical, other is pyramidal, but the way to differentiate is the presence of 3 set of precision grooves for accurate bending and closing loops. Flat tip is serrated for firm gripping. Used to bend hard spring wires up to 0.020 inch in diameter. Again, similar to 139, this is the second plier which is most important for your exam. This tweed plier has again been asked in your previous INI exam. So this is a tweed plier or ribbon arch or rectangular arch bending plier, similar to plier number 139. Its number is 142. A standard side instrument with beaks of 0.060 inch wide that are parallel. So इसका difference क्या है with the previous one? The previous pliers were used for bending round wires. This is for exclusively used for bending square or rectangular wires only, not used for bending round wires. Okay. So for use for giving bends, torquing, detorquing the ends of the arch wire. Okay, the beaks have a 90-degree end, so we can give accurate precise bends of 90-degree angle on this. So this is a tweed plier or ribbon arch or rectangular arch bending plier. Next instrument is a 3-prong plier, 3-jaw or triple beak plier. Instrument open करते you can identify it very easily because it will have only instrument which has 3 prongs or 3 ends. Okay, जो important point है जो इसका use है, that is used for giving intraoral and extraoral adjustments of the quad helix appliance. Remember, the activation and deactivation of quad helix is done with the help of this 3-prong plier. Okay. Next is the turret or arch forming turret. So traditionally we used to have straight wires, we didn't have straight preformed arch wires. So to give the desired arch form, we used to use these turrets for rectangular arch wire बनाने के लिए we used to use these turrets. Now these turrets came in various options. Okay, we used to have 0 torque, 5-degree torque, 10-degree, if you can see here. So for this 16 by 16 dimension wire, you can place the wire here, it will give you a 0 torque. If you place the wire in the second slot, it will give you a 7-degree torque, and so on. Okay, so these are color coded. So I don't think anyone is going to ask you the color coding of these torque, but you should know that you can come in various colors for instrument identification in your exam. So no not get confused that only silver or red comes. They can come in various colors. The purpose of this color is to differentiate between the torque values. Okay. Next is the Della Rosa band contouring plier. It is designed to form and contour arch wires using round or rectangular wire. The beak has grooves of 0.4 mm, 0.46 mm, 0.56 mm. Its guiding grooves helps to accentuate the curvature of the arch wire, helps in contouring utility arches and loops to follow arch curves. So this is the Della Rosa band contouring plier. So it's used to form contours in the arch wire and in both round and rectangular wire. Next comes the utility pliers. Utility are the basic pliers which are required. First is the Weingart plier. Again looking at the beak, it is used. So अगर serration है, serrations क्यों चाहिए होते हैं? Serrations किसी भी plier में इसलिए चाहिए होते हैं to you hold the wire properly and firmly. So serrated tips which helps in easy and secure grasping of the arch wire. Guide. So what's the use of this Weingart plier? It is used to guide and move the arch wire in and out for placement inside the bracket and the molar tubes. Okay, so this is this primary purpose or basic purpose, that is the Weingart plier. Again an important plier. Hose plier you must have seen or used it for pedo stainless steel crowns forming. So it again comes in two designs, that is straight and curved. Easy to understand. Straight is for anterior, curved is for posterior. So what's the use? It's used for grasping bands and arch wire during placement and removal and to tie metal ligages. Okay, I hope it's clear until now. Next is the loop forming plier, that is the first is the Nance loop forming plier. Again look at the beak. The beaks are very thin, tapering and have these steps. So what are these steps for? जो loop जिस diameter का bend करना है, on that desired step you can bend it. That's why these steps have been present. So used for finding different loops and adjusting pre-arch shaped arches for the fixed appliance technique. 4-step beaks which are ideal for bending loops of different heights in both round and rectangular wire. So they have a standardized diameter 3, 4, 5 and 6 mm and can be used to bend up wire up to diameter 0.028 inch. So basically आपको क्या पता होना चाहिए? How to identify it and its use. बस little additional information will help you to memorize it properly. Next is the Tweed's loop forming plier. Previously I seen the plier number 142 on a Tweed plier. This is a Tweed's loop forming plier. So these has the serrations for 0.055, 0.075 and 0.90 inch diameter for creating bull and helical loops on wire up to the rectangular wire dimension. Tweed plier are always used for rectangular wires. Okay. Next is the Omega loop forming plier, used for bends and form loops in orthodontic arch wires. They have graduated cones at the various diameter. Okay, again similar kind of shape, but the beaks are present on the one end only. The previous one had Nance loop forming had beaks present on both ends. Again an important instrument, that is the post instruments for debanding and debonding. Okay, beginning the first one, that is the posterior band remover. So it's for removing posterior orthodontic bands. So this nylon tip, this is the nylon tip, is placed on the occlusal surface and the curved beak is placed on a gingival, and through that it is pulled out, the band is pulled out. Okay. Next is the bracket debonding plier. Again comes in two shapes, straight and curved. Curved is used for posterior band bracket removal. Straight one is used for anterior bracket debonding removal. Used for easily lifting of the brackets from the tooth surface. Next is the adhesive removing plier, not used very much. Okay, so we, because we have burrs for that, so the similar kind of plier, similar in shape to this band remover. So it has a straight plier with a blade, nylon tip है but it has a blade for removal of adhesive from the tooth surface after debonding. Not used much, we generally use burrs for that. Next comes the miscellaneous instrument. The first one is very important, that is the corex gauge. Corex gauge, these gauges, these first corex and next Dontrix, these are both very important, used to measure force levels and values. If you remember from your myofunctional appliances and orthopedic appliances, the various force levels which are mentioned for headgears and face masks, these instruments are used for that. Corex gauge is used to measure heavy forces in the orthopedic appliances. Okay, ranging from 200 to 2000 gram. Okay, next is the Dontrix gauge. Dontrix gauge is used for measuring less amount of forces, that is the forces in the level of ounces. And where are these forces leveled? If you remember, for intrusion, retraction, for bodily movement, if you remember from the biomechanics classes. So these gauge, Dontrix gauge is used to measure those forces. Okay, the one tip that goes into the coil spring and it's used to pull the force, the amount of pull which occurs. This gauge is here, values are mentioned here, it comes here. Okay, next comes the Bolli's gauge, which I have seen during our 11th 12th, used in your physics laboratory. So very easy to identify. There's some vernier caliper, metric caliper used to measure tooth arch form and facial dimension and thickness of various dental material up to 2 decimal places. It's very easy to identify. The important ones are the corex gauges and the Dontrix gauge. Again, a very important instrument, that is the Matthew needle holder, a Matthew ligature plier. Okay, is used to hold ligature pliers and elastic modules, which for tying around. Sorry. Modules and ligature wire used for tying arch wires around the brackets. So this is the use of Matthew needle holder, Matthew ligature plier. Again I am saying, just look at the tips, the serration, and you will be able to identify most of the instruments very easily. Next is the tucker. So जब हमने ligature wire को tie कर लिया, we cut it with the ligature cutter, the instrument which I have seen. Now we have to tuck the loose end inside the arch wire, so that it does not hurt or cause damage to the cheek or mucosa. So for that instrument we use the tucker or director. Again, look at its tip, it has a small depression used for tucking away the loose end of the ligature wire behind the arch wire. Next is the cheek retractor, where you need to identify. The important one is the second image, that is the Nola's dry system or the Nola's cheek retractor. It has additional ends or holes in which, through which you can place suction tips, so it keeps the mucosa dry for banding or bonding purposes. The second image is important, that is the Nola's dry system. So just for completion's sake, dental photographic mirrors and tongue separators, tongue guards, you all know, must have used in your practice as well. Yes, this is the important instrument, that is the orthodontic mini screwdriver or implant driver, used for placing and removing tats, that is the temporary anchorage devices. Okay, mini screws tats placement के लिए, the screw goes inside this tip and it's screwed inside the mouth, used for placing orthodontic mini screws or implants. Next comes the spot welder, again a very commonly asked question. Identify the instrument. So this is a spot welder used for welding bands together, welding brackets to those bands, okay, in wide variety of uses in the orthodontic field. So it uses a principle of electrical resistance. The bands are placed here, the current is passed, and the band gets welded. Okay, additional purpose is for using heat treatment as well and soldering as well, but it is not present in all variety of spot welder, but you should know. So com identify the instrument. This is a spot welder. Lastly, the pressure molding device machine, or trademarked with the name of Biostar. In the today's field of aligners, this is the machine to prepare, mold the plastic sheet on the model for creating aligners, soft night guards, and for retainers as well. Okay, so this is a pressure molding machine, or used for forming aligners. So these are all the instruments. I've summarized them, the machines used in orthodontics. Just again I'm highlighting, look at the tip and you'll be able to identify all most of the instruments very easily. That's the way to differentiate the instrument. थोड़ा confusing होता है, but still by looking at the tip and going through them again and again, you'll be able to differentiate it, because I know most of you wouldn't have used them or seen them in your life, but still since it's part of your curriculum exam, one should know. Okay, so if there is any query, any doubt, we'll be taking in up more images of the appliances and all in the upcoming sessions, and there's still much, at least a lot much to know, so stay tuned. Okay, so that with that we'll close our session.